Welcome to IM Movies. Today we're looking into the 2005 film called Melissa P. The movie begins with Melissa, a 15-year-old high school student living with her mother Daria and her grandmother Elvira, a heavy smoker living with a heart condition, while her father works as an engineer on an oil rig in the Indian Ocean. However, Melissa has grown to have a close-knit relationship with her grandmother, who talks to her about almost anything, but keeps getting distant from her mother, who seems to be ignorant of many changes happening to Melissa. Now, being a shy girl, Melissa loves to express herself through her diary, as she never fails to pen down important dates and events in it, serving as her most trusted companion. One summer afternoon, Melissa and her best friend Manuela attend a pool party hosted at the house of Melissa's longtime crush, Danielle. Danielle is a rich and attractive guy, and Melissa, although shy, has always strived to get his attention. At the party, Danielle welcomes the girls and soon begins to lust after Melissa, knowing well that she has a crush on him. Now, although Melissa can't swim, she tries to hide it from Danielle. In an attempt to hide it, she quickly changes her clothes and sits by the poolside. However, Melissa soon gets pulled into the water by Danielle and she struggles to stay afloat. Seeing this, Manuela yells at Danielle, telling him that she can't swim, and he quickly pulls her out of the water. Afterwards, Danielle asks Melissa if she is afraid, but she claims she isn't, telling him that she knows how to swim, but he knows the truth. Shortly after, Danielle invites Melissa over to a secluded waterfront area of his house and promises to teach her how to swim if she comes back alone some other time. Danielle begins to flirt with Melissa and later asks her if she wants a kiss from him. Without hesitation, Melissa replies saying yes. However, Danielle only makes her perform oral sex on him, telling her that she'll get an opportunity to kiss him next time, and arrogantly walks away. With this, Melissa feels used and despised, and despite the ugly incident, her longing for Danielle only intensifies. However, Danielle never reached out to her all through the summer holiday, and she cried her eyes out, wishing she could vanish without a trace. After summer, school resumes, and Melissa still can't wait to see Danielle. However, Manuela warns her that Danielle doesn't care about her, but in a twist, Melissa says she cares about him. In class, Melissa can't seem to pay attention anymore as she fantasizes about Danielle, thinking about erotic things she'd love to do to him, as she repeatedly scribbles his name in her book. Back home, Melissa's grandmother Elvira helps her with everything, as she's the only one that seems to understand Melissa, especially now that she's hitting puberty. Subsequently, Melissa's body begins to react sexually to almost everything, even during school exercises. However, a new boy in class, Marco, sees this and seems to have a crush on her, but Melissa doesn't even notice him, as she continues to long for Danielle. One day, after many failed attempts to get Danielle's attention, Manuela takes Melissa to a bar where they find Danielle hanging out with his friends. Melissa stares at Danielle from a distance, wishing he would look at her. Luckily for her, one of Danielle's friends, Arnaldo, notices Melissa and draws Danielle's attention to her. After this, Danielle introduces Melissa to Arnaldo, as Melissa seductively stares at him, hoping he will kiss her. Seeing this, Danielle decides to take Melissa home, and she loses her virginity to him. However, during the affair, Melissa tells Danielle that she loves him, but he coldly rejects her. Feeling humiliated again, Melissa decides that henceforth, she'll treat men just the way she has been treated, and vows never to let any man hurt her again. Subsequently, Melissa begins to take swimming lessons and occasionally tries to write emails to her father, expressing how much she needs him in her life, but she always deletes it in the end. Meanwhile, Melissa's parents decide to send Elvira to a nursing home, where she'll get intensive care due to her heart condition and smoking habits. However, this decision doesn't sit well with Melissa, coupled with the fact that her mother did not consult her before making decision. At the nursing home, Melissa spends some memorable time with Elvira. They both hug each other and begin to cry. On getting home, Melissa tells her mother how disappointed she is, asking her if she's happy now that Elvira is gone. However, Daria tells Melissa that she loves Elvira, stating that she'll be happier where she is now, but Melissa insists they bring her back home immediately, realizing that her parents actually planned this together. Melissa grows cold toward her mother and their relationship goes sour. On Melissa's birthday, she decides to celebrate with Manuela at a local restaurant. There, Melissa spots an older man staring at her, so she decides to torment him by seductively staring at him, prompting the man to leave his seat to join her. However, Melissa and Manuela soon leave the place after getting him aroused. Elvira finally comes home for Christmas, and Melissa is excited to see her. Shortly after, Elvira asks Melissa to make her a cup of tea, and during this time, she senses that Melissa is going through tough times and decides to tell Daria about it. However, Daria tells her that Melissa is just fine, stating that she's still a kid and that she doesn't even have a boyfriend yet. Regardless, Elvira advises Daria to look deeply into Melissa's eyes to see her troubles, but Daria doesn't seem concerned. Afterwards, Elvira takes Melissa into her room, which is now being used as a utility room, grabs her brush, and uncovers one of her hidden nude teenage photos. Then, Elvira begins to brush Melissa's hair, revealing the story behind the picture. Elvira tells Melissa that she was cheated on and humiliated by a guy she once eloped with to Paris, revealing that she was able to overcome him after brushing her hair 100 times in front of a mirror. At the beginning of the following year, Melissa promises to be a new person in her diary, stating that she'll find true love, tenderness, and passion as a new person. However, while writing these resolutions, she gets a call from Danielle asking her to come over to his place and stating that he has a surprise for her, and she agrees. At Danielle's place, Melissa finds herself back at the mercy of the same guy she promised not to see anymore. Afterward, Danielle reveals his friend Arnaldo as the surprise he is talking about, suggesting that they have a threesome. Melissa seems shocked and reluctant at first, but later decides to engage in it, taking full control of the situation to explore her sexuality. However, Melissa soon finds herself seeking more ways to get pleasure as she registers on a live sex chat platform with the name Myself, ready to have sex with anyone willing. Melissa's sexual urges got worse to the extent that she even had sex with a museum custodian during one of her class trips. At school, Melissa's diary, in which she had written down details of all her sexual escapades, falls into the hands of her classmates, including Manuela, and they mockingly read it out loud to other students. However, she soon walks in on them reading it and struggles to collect it from them as they plan on tossing it around. But Marco grabs it and hands it over to her. Feeling betrayed, Melissa confronts Manuela, asking her what kind of friend she is, and angrily walks out of the class. Later that day, Melissa visits Elvira at the nursing home, but finds her in a loved-up position with a man. Seeing how the man held and looked at Elvira, Melissa wished she could find someone to hold her and look at her in such a passionate way. However, Manuela, now feeling bad about her actions, begins to seek Melissa's forgiveness, but Melissa doesn't want anything to do with her, preferring to dance and listen to music through her headphones as Marco quietly watches her dance slowly. Shortly after that, Melissa gets a call from Arnaldo and rushes to meet him. Then Arnaldo blindfolds her and leads her down to an underground basement, where he has her perform oral sex on him and 4 other young men. After this incident, Melissa tries to get over it by brushing her hair in front of a mirror, just as Elvira told her, but it doesn't seem to work. The next day in school, Melissa sees her name written on a window and soon realizes that everyone now knows about it. However, Melissa decides to get her next fill of sexual escapades from one of her online sex chat companions known as Anyone. Melissa gets his address, and they both agree to meet the next day. The next day, Daria gets home from work with a dog she just bought for Melissa, but couldn't find her in the house. However, Daria soon gets a call from the nursing home concerning Elvira, but she rushes over to look for Melissa in her room, but can't find her there. After many failed attempts to reach Melissa on the phone, Daria sees Melissa's diary and decides to go through it. After seeing the content of the diary and how her innocent daughter had detailed her sex life, Daria finds it hard to believe her eyes and decides to call her again, but Melissa, who is now at the apartment of her online lover, she refuses to pick up. With this, Daria decides to go to the nursing home alone. At the apartment, Melissa sees 3 red boxes and an instruction that says open the boxes and choose who you want to be. However, Melissa decides to try out all 3 sexual outfits. Shortly after, Mr. Anyone arrives at the apartment but can't find Melissa. But he realizes that she had worn up the clothing from each of the boxes and subsequently calls out to Melissa, referring to her as Myself, based on her online chat name. After a while, Mr. Anyone finds Melissa hiding in a closet and asks her why she'd gone against his instruction. Realizing that the man derives pleasure from being whipped, Melissa begins to whip him as he moans with pleasure. However, the man soon becomes violent towards Melissa as he begins to whip her in return. But this act scares Melissa, and she manages to escape the building. Afterwards, Melissa rushes over to the nursing home to meet Elvira, but she meets her mother there instead, who then breaks the news of Elvira's passing. Melissa mourns the death of Elvira, stating that she's now been left all alone. On hearing this, Daria realizes the depth of the void she needs to fill, seeing that her presence has not been felt in her daughter's life. Daria acknowledges that she's been blind to many things that Elvira saw and apologizes to Melissa, promising to be there for her. At this moment, Daria confronts Melissa about the content of her diary, asking her if it is real or fictional. Melissa confirms that the things she wrote in it are true. This revelation breaks Daria's heart, and the two share a tearful embrace as Daria apologizes for being so ignorant. On the last day of school, Melissa finally forgives Manuela, and they both rekindle their friendship as they ride to school. On getting to school, they see Arnaldo confronting Danielle about having sex with his girlfriend, slapping him on the face. Meanwhile, at the result board, Marco finally musters up the courage to approach Melissa, telling her that he'll be transferring to an art school, which has been his passion all along. Then, Marco shows Melissa a drawing book where he sketched several pictures of her and subsequently shows her a particular one he drew on the day he fell in love with her. Afterward, Marco draws one last proper portrait for Melissa and writes down his phone number. Melissa cheerfully receives the portrait, and they both kiss each other on the cheek. Marco leaves afterwards, and Danielle approaches Melissa to invite her over to his house for a night party. Melissa tells him she's had enough parties, and they are all the same after all. However, Danielle tries to seductively convince Melissa to be there, but this time she feels nothing at all for him, showing that she has finally overcome his acts. In Melissa's mind, we see her attending the party, but now she has evolved. She watches other people get wasted and do all sorts of erotic stuff, but it doesn't even bother her anymore. As she walks near the cliff, Melissa looks back to everyone she knows and jumps into the water. Slowly she drowns and realizes she is now worry-free. She emerges to the surface with a smile on her face, symbolizing her courage, and finally moving forward for a better life. In the end, Melissa and her mother rekindle their love as they bring flowers to Elvira's grave, and the two blissfully hug each other. And that's where our story ends. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.